Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show today. Robbie, what do we got?
Matt Taibbi joins us to discuss his reporting on the Virginia gubernatorial race, and Team Rising weighs in on the latest reconciliation battle. But first, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee approved embattled former Mayor Rahm Emanuel's appointment as ambassador to Japan yesterday. However, not all Democrats were on board. Senators Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Ed Markey of Massachusetts asked to be recorded as no votes. In a statement, Senator Merkley denounced Emanuel's role in the alleged cover-up of the police murder of teenager Laquan McDonald, writing, quote, "Black Lives Matter. Here in the halls of Congress, it is important that we not just speak and believe these words, but put them into action in the decisions we make." He continued, "I have carefully considered Mayor Emanuel's record and the input of civil rights leaders, criminal justice experts, and local elected officials who have reached out to the Senate to weigh in, and I have reached the decision that I cannot support his nomination to serve as U.S. ambassador."
Emanuel's fate now rests in the hands of the full Senate, which will vote next week on his confirmation. Without Merkley and Markey, the former mayor will need the support of at least 3 Republicans. According to the Chicago Tribune, 5 Republican senators have so far voiced support for Emanuel. That's Susan Collins of Maine, Roy Blunt of Missouri, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, who was himself ambassador to Japan under Trump, and James Risch of Idaho. And so, to be clear, Merkley appears to be referring to the fact that Emanuel, and this is not in dispute, covered up the murder of a child in Chicago, and that's why he didn't run for re-election. Interesting that he's going to need, at least some Republican support to overcome that. You would think that covering up a murder maybe disqualifies you from a major ambassadorship, but I guess you would be wrong.
And I would also think, well, yes, that. And I would also think that Republicans would take this opportunity to stick it to a former Obama administration official. But, it's interesting because sometimes, we see all the fighting, all the bitter partisan feuding, all the cable news shouting. But behind the scenes, some of these people are all just friends.
Yes.
It's for cameras, it's
That's
for
the
show.
Key point. That's a
right.
key point.
They have relationships. They yell at each other, and then they have dinner together.
Right. It shows you that this intense partisanship that we see in Washington is, for a lot of them, a game.
Yes.
And that the real action is happening behind the scenes. Hagerty, the senator from Tennessee, he's a finance guy. Rahm was a finance guy for a while, in a revolving door, in and out of politics and finance. And so Hagerty's like, hey, a finance guy in and out of politics who's going to be ambassador to Japan, sounds like me.
Right.
Oh, he said mean things about Republicans? Fine. Because that would be the big problem, not the covering up of the murder.
Right.
So yes, what this does really reveal is that these folks who style themselves as these intense partisan warriors on behalf of the causes that they believe in, no, that's just how they style themselves on ABC, where he was a journalist, by the way, not disclosing his corporate income, and while talking about all these different issues that affected those corporate interests.
Right.
So, yeah. So, switching gears here to some new breaking reporting from the Intercept. For Sharon Lerner and Mar Fistendahl on Ecohealth Alliance and the NIH, a story we've been covering for a while. They have new information on this. Detailed notes of NIH communications obtained by the Intercept show that back in May 2016, the NIH had an exchange with the head of Ecohealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, about experiments Ecohealth was planning to conduct on coronaviruses under the terms of an NIH grant called, quote, Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence. Now, during that time, Ecohealth was entering its 3rd year of a 5-year, $3.1 million grant that included research with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So in a 2016 progress report, Ecohealth noted its plans to carry out experiments infecting humanized mice with hybrid viruses. The NIH raised concerns on the experiments because gain of function research at the time was banned. It was paused. But they were dismissed, and researchers went on to infect the genetically engineered mice with altered MERS and SARS viruses.
Initially, NIH enforced a funding pause, demanding more information from Ecohealth on their findings, but agency staff then adopted language that Ecohealth Alliance fit to govern its own work. The agency also inserted several phrases into grant materials describing immediate actions the group would take if the viruses they created prove to become more transmissible or disease-causing as the result of the experiments.
Right.
Like panic. What are the what are the steps we're going to take if this mutates beyond our control and is very infectious? We're going to put our hands in the air and no, we're going to burn all the records.
Yeah, we're going to burn the records and we're going to run out the door screaming, "Everybody run!" So people should read the story. It's there's a lot to it, but put simply, NIH officials said, "Hey, Dajak, this looks like gain-of-function research that you're planning to do, and that's not allowed under the pause on gain-of-function research." And then eventually they said, "Well, how can we fund this, so that you can continue to do this research?" And he suggested language in the exchange with the NIH officials. Here's what you could put into the grant of the money that you're giving me. If let's say if you get an extra log of function out of these mice, then that's gain of function. Then you will immediately alert NIH and cease your research. So he wrote his own conditions, which we also know from other Intercept reporting that he later broke. So he wrote his own conditions and broke his own conditions because he did not inform the NIH and did not, and we don't have any evidence that he stopped. Now, the other point here is that this particular research kind of genetically couldn't have led, this particular project could not have led to SARS-CoV-2. But this is the one that we know about from their kind of annual reporting. They don't put every single project that they were doing, every single experiment into their annual report. And so it does raise the question, what else were they doing if they were doing this type of coronavirus gain-of-function research?
Well, they're basically saying, what they said was, so we're going to do it, and then if it goes really badly, then we're going to alert everybody. Like, that's satisfactory.
Right, and then they didn't even alert. Right. Which, it's ridiculous that would, but then they didn't even do that. Yeah.
But and this just speaks to, so the restriction exists. And they're like, okay, well, how can we evade this restriction by just using, like, that's what our government health contractor sort of people are doing. They're just sidestepping the actual requirements by by messaging, by changing the messaging, by changing the written.
And it's a classic contractor government grant relationship too. Like this in particular may or may not have led to a pandemic, and it involves research. But you see the exact same thing with the military-industrial complex, a very cozy relationship with the officials in charge of doling out the government money and the contractors who are on the other side, and working together to figure out how they can make it all go smoothly so everybody can do what they need to do.
Well, following the Virginia governor's race, CNN pressed Dr. Fauci over whether or not school closures were the best choice. Let's look at that.
With the benefit of hindsight now, looking back on school closures in so many places, do you think that schools were kept closed for too long in some places?
I think it's very difficult to go back in the retrospectoscope and figure that out. There were so many complicating issues going on. Better to look forward right now. I think it's going to make the issue of schools much easier, much safer as we get more and more children.
The retrospectoscope.
Incredibly important, I think, that conversation is happening.
Yes.
Brianna, I'm pretty sure, lives in Virginia, so understands, would know a lot of people in suburban Virginia who would have been extremely frustrated. We know she lives in the Metro DC area at least, would have known a lot of people who were extraordinarily angry. And we talked about this on the show yesterday about the way that the school boards approached, keeping the schools closed for the entire year, closing down playgrounds for a long time, like playgrounds.
And I totally get it that at the very beginning we had no idea what to expect from this virus. When this all starts happening in March, April of 2020,
for sure, absolutely,
shut everything down. I get it. Then we had the summer period, and then we had a fall where actually a lot of private schools, some schools in red municipalities, they did open up. Pretty much, some of my nieces and nephews who attend private school in Michigan, they were pretty much in class that whole time. And what you did not see was much worse outbreaks, health outcomes, et cetera, driven by those openings than as opposed to places where the schools were really militantly shut down. So by the time of winter, then following winter, we really did know. So like, yes, the retrospective scope, whatever, we don't understand from the very beginning, but we did then have a test period where and by then we knew that this was not a disease that was really affecting the overwhelming majority of children. And still things stayed shut down for a long time. I mean, even today, a school will close at the drop of the hat if there's one case. Some schools, not all schools, but some schools. So I don't want to hear from Dr. Fauci that that was true at the beginning, but now it's a year and a half later. It's more than a year and a half later. Right, and well-off parents, to your point, were able to put their kids in those private schools. Yes, where working class parents could not do that and had to figure out, well, Kim was talking about this yesterday. People, gig workers having their kids in the car with them, because what can you do? It is interesting though. Non-college white women swing that much, however many points for Youngkin. 20 points. Those were the parents who were maximally inconvenienced by this kind of thing. Yep. Right, and so it's interesting to see though Fauci and CNN reacting to an election rather than following the science. Right. It's like, okay, the science would have allowed us to make a variety of different decisions around school closures. The politics, though, aren't looking very good anymore. So now it militates towards... I remember when Fauci and sort of other public health officials started ceding their sort of a moral authority on this during the summer of protests, the 2020 summer, when it seemed like the Black Lives Matter protests were getting a pass from health officials who were inclined to anything you wanted to do, they were going to shame you for doing it. But then, but racism is a disease. Right. Which everybody found so laughable. That would have been a great opportunity to be like, look, we don't recommend this, but it's outdoors and outdoors is safer. Sure, they could have said that, yeah. And so wear a mask, stay socially distanced. This is still America. Yeah. But the playgrounds were still locked at that time. And you could have eased your way into a more common sense approach. But we didn't do that. Anyway, we will tell you what's on our radars up next.